Stars
Podcast. This is the
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
Well, here we are. It is a brand new year, which means another year of some wrestling talk here on the YouTubes. Also on Rumble, if you prefer a secondary platform to watch on. And whether you are a new or returning viewer, this is the same Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast that we've been distributing and bringing to you to YouTube and Rumble for the last, I guess it would be 4 or 5 months now. Wow. And that is the FSWR podcast, 2 shows weekly here on YouTube and Rumble, Mondays and Fridays, bringing you wrestling recaps on AEW Dynamite, Rampage, and pay-per-views. We also cover NWA Powerrr, article analyses, weekend pay-per-view events, and other news content here each week. We also have our retro review series each Friday, where we analyze and recap the archives of NWA World Championship Wrestling and World Class Championship Wrestling. In the coming year, we will be discussing WCW from the year 1986 and World Class Championship Wrestling from 1983. And as always, subscriptions are important, but you can do me a favor in the algorithms here on YouTube if you leave a comment down below and like the video for me. Got a nice little variety on today's program. We are actually going to be talking about a WWE show for a change. I believe the last WWE discussion that we had was, SummerSlam of 2021. Of course, we had stopped reviewing NXT probably around October of last year. But in terms of main roster WWE programming, I don't think I've reviewed a show since SummerSlam. So that was a very interesting sit-through from Saturday night. But we will get to day one toward the end of the show. For now, I do want to kind of keep a consistent rundown of the shows that I watched in some kind of order. And we will begin with AEW Rampage from December 31st. And then we will transition into Powerrr after that. But let's get this AEW report out of the way, because I know that's what everybody comes here to listen to, is to hear me rant about how horrible this show is. Following the worst episode of Dynamite I think I can recall in recent memory, I can tell you for sure AEW had a lot to make up for with this particular episode of Rampage from New Year's Eve. Not to mention, if you've been following my Rampage recaps over the last, say month and a half, these shows really have not been all that good. Not even to really say that they've been bad necessarily. They're just boring shows. They're hour-long extensions of Dynamite programming, some of the more recent episodes coming off like slightly upgraded versions of AEW Dark, and conspicuous by their absences, they've also completely removed CM Punk and Bryan Danielson from making any physical appearances on the show. I don't know why, but it has not gone unnoticed. So that all said, this was better than Dynamite, that's for damn sure. Even with the inclusion of that wretched women's match, which we will talk about in a bit. The opener was Darby Allin versus Anthony Bowens. And at least we can breathe a sigh of relief with the fact that AEW had a singles match on this program, which was few and far between when it came to Dynamite on Wednesday night. It was a fine little TV match. Probably went a few minutes longer than it needed to, but it wasn't bad. Of course, it's AEW, so they can never just have a cold match where a guy wins a match clean without angles or shenanigans. No, we must have Sting get involved with Max Caster and whip him into the barricade after attempted interference. That was annoying. I will at least credit both guys for attempting to actually run with some kind of story throughout the match. Bowens did a cool-looking Irish whip to Darby, who rammed his shoulder and arm into the post before they cut to the break. And the bump Darby took for that spot was actually pretty well done. He basically did like a full wrap around the ring post and then tumbled down to the mat. And the finish saw Darby do the big running dive to take out the heels on the outside, goes up top to hit Bowens with the coffin drop for the 3. It was inoffensive. And as far as the random afterbirth with Andrade's music playing, only for the Acclaim to jump Sting and Darby after the bell with the boombox, I honestly don't even want to dignify that with a response. Again, it goes back to the whole thing of, why does every AEW match have to have interference or afterbirth angles that result pretty much the exact same way every time? I presume the answer is because we can never think of any other creative ways to advance feuds or storylines. Hence, lather, rinse, repeat. My question more so has to do with what the point of the Andrade thing was to begin with. And again, I totally could have been missing something here, but did we actually see Andrade make a physical appearance in this segment? Or did they literally just play his theme music and that was it? Because I don't ever recall seeing Andrade on screen at all. I heard his music hit, and then within 5 seconds of his theme playing, Bowens and Caster have already jumped Sting and Darby and laid them out, and it was immediately to the back. So I guess Darby is going to feud with Andrade now because, fuck it, why not? We signed Andrade for some unknown reason. May as well get the most out of him as possible now that we've realized he's been a complete waste of a contract. The technique with Hook segment with Taz dubbed over was pretty cool. Again, I'm not entirely sold on Hook just yet, but they're doing something with him, and he's being presented differently from most of what everyone else is doing right now. I'm pretty sure Taz probably has his fingerprints on most of his creative direction, and for my money, given who's overseeing the bulk of the key stories on this program to begin with, giving Taz the book for his son's storylines is probably not the worst decision. Then we get the street fight tag match with the girls. It is Anna Jay and Ty Conti versus Penelope Ford and the Bunny. And upon initial viewing of this match, I couldn't actually think of a word to describe how bad this was, so I actually went to thesaurus.com to find all of the synonyms for awful that I could possibly find to summarize this match, a la Chris Jericho and WCW. And among those lists of words I came up with, I pretty much boiled it down to the following, in somewhat alphabetical order, I believe, too. Appalling, atrocious, abhorrent, crummy, disastrous, duff, there's a word you don't hear used every day, egregious, excruciating, gruesome, hideous, laughable, lousy, pathetic, pitiful, rubbish, unpleasant, and my personal favorite of the bunch, very bad. We were told for pretty much the entirety of the match, this feud has come to such a boiling point where we must settle the score with a street fight. That is what we were told. Keep in mind, they did not actually bother to explain what in the fuck any of these girls have been feuding over. I watch this show every week, and I still have no idea what the hell spawned this feud to begin with. The extent of my knowledge about the feud going in was that the Bunny hit Anna Jay and Ty Conti with brass knucks a lot. That's literally the only consistent story and theme that I've gathered from this program. And of course, it's 4 girls with very limited ring ability to begin with, so what do the geniuses involved with writing this show do? pair them all to work together. And the matches have pretty much sucked cock no matter who was squaring off. The most notable being anything involving Penelope Ford. So, they did a hardcore match. It's so boring to even bother mentioning at this point because we see street fights and hardcore matches every other fucking week on this program, but it was every lame, garbage hardcore fight you've ever seen, just with girls involved in it. And no, it doesn't make it any better for all you lame brains out there just because it involved women. In fact, watching the four girls smash each other with gimmicks, I actually started laughing at various points of the match because it was so ridiculous. The hardest laugh of which came at the point where Penelope attempted a moonsault press off of the top rope onto Anna Jay onto a table. And of course, the table didn't break because AEW still has not learned that gimmick tables still outweigh the women in this company. So, of course, 10 seconds later, they drag out another table from under the ring. And this one had rosy lips and glittery shit painted on it. So, obviously, things were going to go much smoother with this table bump. Penelope ended up cracking a gimmick glass bottle over the back of Conti's head. So, of course, where's Conti Blade? Straight down the middle of her forehead. Somewhere in this match, the bunny gigged randomly, and I have no idea how, when, and why this occurred. All I remember is Penelope sliding out of the ring. She sees the bunny bleeding against the ring apron. She screams in shock, and then she proceeded to grab more weapons from under the ring. Again, that was comedy to me, and I do not think it was intended to be. I do remember Conti picking up Penelope on the apron and driving her through a table with the Gotch pile driver, which actually didn't look half bad. And thank God the table actually did break, because had it not, that probably would have been the end of Penelope Ford's life on this earth. Oh yeah, I need to mention this too. We had a great Only in AEW moment here, where the girls are in the midst of their horrible car wreck brawling, and then, for absolutely no reason, the screen just cuts to black for commercial. No logical transition, no announcers mentioning the upcoming break, just immediate cutaway. That was grand. I think the big notable spot here that everyone's going to talk about is the deal with Allie taking the top rope stupid plex onto the tacks, which was just as stupid and meaningless as every thumbtack bump in the history of modern wrestling. I honestly can't even recall the last time I cared about thumbtacks. I probably haven't given a shit about tack spots in wrestling since I saw Mankind get dropped on them in Hell in a Cell back in '98. And here we are, it's 2022. People are still doing tack spots like anyone could possibly care. I actually wrote down comically at the end of it, and I'm going to read this verbatim because I have no other way to break this down. This was probably the best women's match AEW's had in a long time, simply based on the fact that it fit right into the playing field of untrained green female talent doing garbage brawling because they can't believably do anything else. And I know that'll piss off a lot of people, but look at me with a straight face and tell me I'm wrong. Name me one good professional wrestling non-hardcore match that you've ever seen Penelope Ford involved with. I rest my case. And all the while, the babyfaces won in the end, and the only thing I could think after watching it was, why exactly did these girls kill themselves in a 10-minute street fight in the middle of a taped show? Can anyone explain to me what in the fuck was so personal with this program that it necessitated 4 girls bleeding and taking thumbtack bumps and pile drivers through tables and going through all this random carnage for a TV match that no one will remember 6 months from now? I'll let you get back to me on that one. In our main event, it is Cody Rhodes and Ethan Page for the TNT Championship. By the way, I had to write this down because I thought this was hilarious. Anyone else notice the lack of blood splatter on the mat for this match? Yeah. Tape shows. What can you do? I'm not going to repeat what I said about Cody in the last match he had with Sammy, because I think most of that could be said the same about this match here, but I mean, it's really not that far off. I've put him over before, and I'll say it again. Cody is a perfectly competent professional wrestler. He can do all the basics and all the fundamentals in the world. And when he just focuses on the basics and doesn't get too cute and flashy with all his WWE influenced angle garbage, his matches are usually enjoyable to watch. And I've been an advocate of Ethan Page on the show for a while now. The Dan Lambert top team stuff sucks, and I think it's a huge waste of Ethan on the show to thrust him in a makeshift tag team with Scorpio Sky. But the dude can work. He has a great ring presence. His promos are usually great. He works that smug heel role extremely well. And they had a perfectly fine, competent, well-worked main event TV match. The character dynamics were, of course, all screwed up because Cody's been healed for weeks now, and I mean, Ethan's been a heel since he showed up on the scene. And what ended up happening for a good chunk of the match is that Ethan ended up getting more babyface pops than Cody, so by default, Ethan was essentially the babyface who was selling and working the injured knee and kind of making a semi-valiant comeback at the end, which was very wacky. Again, we had more run-in garbage at the end with Scorpio, who ended up getting run off by Dustin through the crowd. Completely pointless and unneeded, but again, it's AEW. No one can ever just fucking wrestle on this show. And the finish saw Ethan go for the Ego's Edge, but Cody escaped, hit a series of crossroads, followed by the Tiger Driver 98 for the 3. Like I mentioned, if you watch the match in a vacuum, or you watch it on mute and completely ignore the crowd's response to anything involved with Cody on this show, it's a very good TV main event. If you are trying to make heads or tails out of anything involving Cody and his current character incarnation on this program, you're probably still scratching your head wondering what the fuck is going on. And I got no answers for you. I mean, I've still been under the presumption that he's working the fans and this whole trolling babyface persona is just a temporary thing, but I mean, it still doesn't make it any less stupid. And of course, because most fans are idiots, they've completely overlooked just how absurd the whole idea behind this story is to begin with. It's like, looking at it objectively for a minute, even if Cody is secretly a heel in disguise, why in the fuck does he need to prolong it? Like, really think about that for a minute. Put aside your, long-term story development or whatever. The fans are already booing him vociferously. If he does flat out turn heel down the road, he's still going to get the same response. It's not like the eventual payoff of the turn is going to generate any different response from what he's getting now. The whole thing is just so stupid. And the problem, moreover, is the fact that with where we are currently in the story of Cody pretending to act like a hero on camera every week, it just makes everything he's involved with on this show that much more insufferable. It's like he has this bizarre idea in his mind that if I pretend to be a babyface for an extended period of time, and the fans boo me more and more each week, it'll make my eventual heel turn that much more meaningful when I finally do switch. No, Cody, not really. In fact, it won't change a goddamn thing because you could not be any more hated than you are right now on this current program. There are no more boos that could possibly come out of the response you're getting now. The only thing that the eventual heel turn will prove is that it took you a year longer to realize what everyone has already concluded. I mean, at least if you outright portray yourself on camera as an unlikable douchebag, there's a chance it'll make your segments more tolerable each week. But the whole John Cena approach of, I'm going to pretend to ignore the boos and conceal a non-existent babyface persona on television, it's dumb. It is an incredible work of art beyond all logic and comprehension. It's actually semi-entertaining at this point to watch, and yet, through and through, as wacky as the whole Cody thing is in AEW right now, still better than Jeff Jarrett. And believe you me, I've gone back and watched some of those late 90s, early 2000 Nitro shows. Cody is much more tolerable than Double J. So that was the final Rampage of 2021. And to be blunt, with the direction this show's decided to go in the last couple months, I honestly don't expect much to change in the coming year. I expect an hour's worth of moderately uneventful wrestling with an obligatory bad women's match wedged in the middle and 0 star power to behold on the show. That's pretty much what Rampage is on Friday right now, and if they keep it an hour, I may be able to tolerate it in the future, but like I said before, they found a formula and they are, by God, sticking with it. So if it works for them, it works for them, but I'm finding that these Rampage shows every Friday are becoming less and less valuable, if that makes any sense. So we'll see if anything changes in 2022, but I'm not giving my hopes up. Anyway, moving on to NWA Powerrr from December 28th. This was a special year-in review show, and because I missed a good chunk of a lot of the earlier stuff in the NWA this past year, given that I really only started following things probably around mid-August, I actually wanted to check out the show and see if there was anything in the beginning of the year worth revisiting. The first clip they showed was a battle royal that happened back in May, and that was the match that set up Nick Aldis' title program with Trevor Murdoch. Really not much to report on that, although we all know how phenomenal that Aldis-Murdoch match was from NWA 73. And I will say, too, hearing Aldis healing it up on commentary and spending a good portion of the match burying Trevor, that was pretty entertaining. Here was a match that I thoroughly enjoyed actually going back to watch. Camille and Serena Deeb for the Burke. And that happened back in June. Of course, you all know how high I am on Deeb. I mean, arguably the best female worker in the business today. And she definitely had her work cut out for her going up against Camille. And you can even tell, like, looking back as early as the summer of 2021, Camille was definitely coming along in the ring. And, you know, she's still relatively green now, but even comparing where she was in June of this past year to where she is in the latter half of the year, there's definitely been a lot of growth. I mean, even in this match, looking back, Camille was still fairly awkward and klutzy in the ring. I don't think she was quite comfortable psychologically in the ring and putting things together coherently. Her selling wasn't all that good. I mean, she definitely got blown up by the end of the match. And I mean, God bless Serena. You know, she was probably the best dance partner that Camille could have had in this scenario. But she's miles better than most of the female talent in AEW right now. That's for damn sure. Believe me, I'll take a Camille match over anything I've seen out of fucking Jade Cargill. Obviously, the title switch was kind of a necessity. This was around the point that Deeb ended up signing an exclusive deal with AEW, so they needed her to drop the strap to someone. And with Thunder Rosa out of the picture by this point, too, you really didn't have too many options. Camille was one of their prototype talents they were building for a while. She was someone they could put the strap on, and she would have been a believable champion. And, you know, as we see heading into 2022, she still has the Burke, and she's gotten more comfortable in her role as the dominant, unstoppable heel champion. So now the coming year will be built around the up-and-coming babyface challenger that can take the belt from her. Showed a replay of the Tyrus Pope television title match over the summer where Tyrus actually won the belt, which I did not see live when it first happened. And judging how the match involved Tyrus, it does not look like I missed a whole lot. It was merely boring. I'm a mark for the Pope, though. We all know that. That guy works his ass off when he's on the big stage. And I will concede to this. Wouldn't say that I'm the biggest fan of Tyrus's ring work, personally. That dude is one hell of a TV personality. I love the fact that he pretty much carries the TV title with him everywhere he goes, too. I love seeing the clips of him on Fox News with the 5 panel with Greg Gutfeld, and he's got the belt over his shoulder talking politics. It's just, he's a total gimmick. His promos on the show have been very entertaining, too. And he's always been a real solid promo. So, work rate aside, yeah, Tyrus never really had that going in his favor, but he's definitely been a fun part of NWA programming the last year. Somewhere in the middle of the show, we got clips of La Rebellion winning the tag straps from Stevens and Kratos, thus launching a tag title reign where the champs were pretty much MIA for the remainder of the year on television. And I believe they're still holding the straps as we speak. What else did they do? Oh, yeah, they re-aired the Tim Storm, Nick Aldis, Tom Latimer, Chris Adonis tag match. And if y'all remember, that was used as the catalyst to officially turn Tom on Aldis and break up Strictly Business for good. And that was a show where Tom pile drove Aldis a few times, one of which took place on a chair, and then they did the big stretcher job at the end. That was a real well-done TV angle. I remember that pretty clearly. I think I remember my biggest complaint about the whole thing was, like, they shot that angle, and then Aldis was pretty much back on TV like 2 weeks later, no selling the injury. They tried to play it up like Aldis was off of television for weeks, but I don't know. Some got fucked up with the taping schedule. Oh boy, what else did we have? They aired the last few minutes of that Crimson Jax Dane cage match where Dane threw the white powder and rubbing alcohol into Crimson's face, which was actually more comical the second time around watching it than the first, now that we actually kind of know how the fallout ensued with that program. Of course, it wouldn't have been an NWA Year in Review recap show without a signature match featuring my main man, fucking Mims. After that electrifying, passionate babyface promo on Power a couple weeks back, Mims is my favorite wrestler on this show right now heading into the new year. You know what the funny thing was too, watching this match between him and Scion. I actually remember this match, and I remember it because it was part of that By Any Means Necessary show that they shot like as a 2-part deal, where they filmed a bunch of prelim matches the first week, and most of them were just cold matches without any context. And then the next week they shot all the bigger featured matches. But the main event for that first night was Mims and Scion, and they just went out there and had a great TV main event. Again, with the only thing visibly sucking about the match being Austin Idol's commentary. Just, God, such turn the channel heat. And if you remember, this was the match they used to hype up Scion and Tyrus' TV title match for the Hard Times show on December 4th, which obviously accounts for Idol being out there to do commentary. I did find it interesting that they chose to close the show with this match, but like I said, it'll definitely go down as one of the dark horse unrecognized matches of 2021. And that kind of sucks because it was very good. Obviously, not like a match of the year candidate or anything like that, but yeah, one of NWA's better TV matches of the year that they did. And I know I kind of skipped over a couple other pre-tapes and things, but I mean, that was the show in a nutshell. They just ran down some of the big featured highlights of the year. I know I probably could have easily skipped the show too, considering there wasn't any like new ground to cover, but I like year-end recap shows, especially going back in the time machine and checking out some of the earlier stuff from the beginning of the year. And you don't really see that too much with modern wrestling now. I think that's something that's kind of missing from the art form, is just spending the last couple weeks of the year just not trying to hotshot new material, just, doing like a year-in review recap and just maybe spending an hour and a half, 2 hours of a show having the announcers talk about some of the key storylines and some of the big moments of the year. That's just something that modern wrestling has kind of gotten away from. But, it was a fun show to sit through. And we'll see how things turn out for them in 2022, but I didn't think 2021 was a bad year for them. The NWA 73 event, I think, will probably go down as the best pay-per-view they ran all year. The Empower show from the night before had a little more publicity to it, but generally, I don't think that show was a monumental success like they had intended it to be. And I do not follow any other secondary programming from NWA right now, so I have no idea what the status of that all-female TV show they're running at the moment is. My presumption is probably not good, given that they never talk about it on the regular Power shows and doesn't seem to get much focus or recognition from the mainstream wrestling outlets. So, I don't know. But, I'll say this. Billy Corgan is always testing new concepts and ideas, so I'm sure he'll have something in his back pocket for 2022. My hope is that some of these Ring of Honor crossovers get more TV time because, I definitely think there are some suitable names from that roster that would really fit the mold perfectly for NWA, especially in the long term. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of the Briscoe brothers, but they are a team that I could see working well under the NWA umbrella. I think guys like Silas Young or Kenny King or even a guy like Jonathan Gresham, I think that would be a nice fit for them. Again, the Jay Lethal thing is unfortunate, but God, Lethal would have been such a perfect fit for this show. OGK have already been a consistent feature, but that's sort of what I'm leaving as an open-ended idea for them in 2022. Just seeing some of these former ROH names show up on the show more consistently. And again, we don't really know if they're coming back into the fold in April or May of next year, so other than that, I don't really know what else to expect. I'll keep my fingers crossed, but the NWA has a lot of elements to my general feelings about AEW in a lot of ways. There's a couple good things on the show, but the bad stuff is usually pretty bad, and there's just no way to cover up for it. The only thing I can credit NWA over AEW is that, NWA wrestling, that style appeals more to me. So, even though there's an overabundance of goofiness from time to time, by and large, the promos are what I look forward to every week on NWA. So, as long as they keep things relatively serious and don't go too off the rails with anything, they could shape up to have a pretty good year. And again, I'm really hoping that they leave those doors open for some of these ROH names to come in because, the one thing I've been seeing about NWA is they've lost a lot of good top-tier talent in the last couple of years to AEW, so they're going to need some top-level stars to replace that main event scene and rejuvenate the title picture, so we shall see. Well, having watched this Day 1 show on replay on Sunday afternoon, and realizing that the show was also going to be pushing the 3-hour mark, was already kind of feeling an overwhelming sense of dread going in. And pretty much within the first 2 minutes of the show and learning that the one match that I was looking forward to going in had to be changed because, COVID, well, that also kind of put a damper on my anticipation for the night. Obviously, this news is not groundbreaking at this point, but the originally planned Roman Reigns-Brock Lesnar Universal title match ended up getting canceled because Roman, of course, tested positive before the show. A likely story. And because it's WWE and we never really know what the fuck is a work or a shoot anymore with this company, there was the part of me that kind of wondered in the back of my head if the whole Roman thing was an actual work, but since I have no proof to confirm that we're being worked at the moment, I will take WWE's word for it, and I will run with the narrative that Roman actually tested positive for COVID. So the Roman Brock title match is off, which meant that Brock ended up fighting in the WWE Championship match, which ended up then being a fatal 5-way. And we all know how much I love me some clusterfuck multi-man matches in professional wrestling. Don't already get enough of those with AEW week after week, so what's one more multi-person match at the end of the day? But we will get to it, because that match sure did not disappoint. Opening match was the Usos versus Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, who apparently is now King of the Ring since my absence of watching main roster WWE programming. And pretty much the entire story of this match, from what I've gathered from Michael Cole's god-awful commentary, was that the Usos and the New Day have wrestled over and over again to the point where it's just kind of come ridiculous, or it's kind of become ridiculous. And in an effort to supposedly level the playing field for new and up-and-coming tag teams to get tag team title opportunities, they decided that the best way to accomplish this would be to book another Usos New Day tag title match. Genius. I passively kind of watched this match. It is actually kind of astonishing to me that the New Day are still a fucking thing in WWE. Christ, I remember watching the vignettes they used to show for this group back in, 2014, 2015? It is 2022, and we are still getting New Day Usos tag title matches on pay-per-view level shows. Good lord. At least they finally ditched that old atrocious New Day music. It is good to know that after all these years, I was finally able to distinguish the difference between Jimmy and Jay Uso. Only took him 10 plus years, but one of them finally decided to get a short haircut, and the other keep his hair long but dye part of it red, so, you could actually tell them apart. Like I said, I watched bits and pieces of the match. It was fine, I guess. As per the usual case with WWE matches, most of them go way too fucking long and they start to drag after a while. Crowd was dead for the first half of it until they started doing all the false finishes toward the end. And speaking of dead, Cole's commentary, which is probably the most lifeless and passionless Cole play-by-play I think I've ever seen in my 20-plus years of listening to him do WWE commentary. Just horrible. And the finish to the opening match here, after both teams basically hit everything in the book and did every possible WrestleMania false finish ever conceived, the Usos just hit Kofi with a 3D from out of nowhere and retained the belts. Shout out to Brother Ray and Devon, I guess. So Baron Corbin is now Happy Corbin? And he's also rich, apparently. And he is also affiliated with Riddick Moss. Again, to be fair, I haven't watched main roster WWE in a few years, but if there's one thing that has not changed with Corbin since I stopped watching, it's his continual lack of anything resembling personality and charisma. Anyway, Moss and Drew McIntyre had a match that I pretty much skipped over entirely. All I wrote down about this match is that a year ago around this point, McIntyre, I believe, was wrestling for the WWE Championship. And now he is apparently feuding with Baron fucking Corbin, of all people. Lame. Speaking of lame, that fucking god-awful remix of Randy Orton and Matt Riddle's theme music. Seriously, what the hell was that? It's horrible. I actually kind of like Matt Riddle, contrary to how you may believe given the kind of wrestling I prefer. I've always kind of classified Riddle as a carbon copy of RVD, except Riddle can actually work. And Orton is someone that I've kind of soured on over the years, but in comparison to how he used to be featured and rammed down my throat in the main event picture for years on end, mid-carding tag team level Randy Orton is actually kind of a breath of fresh air for a change. I think I actually remember watching Orton and Riddle work at last year's SummerSlam, and I found them pretty enjoyable together. It was a solid match, probably nothing I would consider like pay-per-view quality, but it was fine. I've always enjoyed the Street Profits in NXT. I think they got called up way too soon, right as they were starting to catch fire a few years ago, but they were a lot of fun to watch. All four guys worked hard. Nothing was outrageously stupid in this match. Orton got a nice hot tag at the end. Can't say I dug the suspect nail polish from Riddle here, but we can overlook that. What else happened in this match? Montez Ford actually took a sick mid-rope DDT too. Got to give him credit there. And the finish was fucking awesome with Riddle launching Ford up into the air and then Orton planted him with an RKO. That was it was almost as cool as the WrestleMania spot they did with Seth a few years ago where Orton countered the curb stomp into the RKO. Yeah, I mean, no complaints from me here. I know people will probably say the Usos New Day tag match was better, and that's fine. I just wasn't crazy about all the false finishes and the match length for that one. By the way, I did jot this down. I skipped over most of the pre-tapes and the video packages on the show. I really didn't want to sit through 3 full hours of this show. But I did watch that Bianca Belair pre-tape in its entirety, and God, is she awesome. Bianca Belair is one of those wrestlers that AEW honestly should be bending over backwards to take away from WWE. Look, if she ever jumped aboard to AEW, she would immediately become their top female star, no question. Fuck Charlotte, fuck Becky Lynch, fuck Sasha Banks, fuck everyone else in that division. If AEW really wants their women's division to matter, whenever Bianca's contract comes up with WWE, AEW ought to be throwing everything under the sun to get her a high-end deal. I'm not kidding. One of the featured matches for the show was this Edge-Miz match, which did have a relatively solid video package leading into it. And God love him, man. Edge is probably the only wrestler I know today that can actually get me to somewhat get invested in a Miz match in 2022. And yeah, Miz is still no good. It's been well over 10 years now, and he's still a horrible professional wrestler, but what can you do? The Miz You Suck chants didn't go undetected. I also get a chuckle out of the spot later on where Miz tried to use the ropes for leverage to roll up Edge, and the fans started a "You can't do that" chant. That was funny. That said, regardless of the Miz's limited ring ability, this was not half bad. Miz matches usually have a lot of smoke and mirrors BS to cover up for his ring setbacks, but, they're usually done in moderation and they work out relatively well. And again, I love the finish to this match. Maurice tries to clock Edge in the head behind the ref's back with her purse. Miz hits the skull-crushing finale for a near fall. Then Miz and Maurice are in panic as Beth Phoenix pretty much rises from the ashes on the rampway and chases Maurice around ringside. And by chase, I mean Maurice was in high heels, so she kind of awkwardly strutted around the ring and up the ramp like Velma while Beth casually walked after her. And then Edge hit Miz with a big spear for the pin. Fine stuff. Probably be it to set up a mixed tag match for the Rumble. Liv Morgan and Becky Lynch had an okay women's title match. The backstory behind the match made sense given the whole video package they played beforehand. I guess I just had a hard time buying the idea that Liv was an actual struggle for Becky to beat at any point. And again, keep in mind, this is coming from someone that has not kept up with main roster WWE, so I don't know. Maybe Liv Morgan's been getting a significant push on TV since I stopped watching, but when I last saw Liv Morgan in a featured capacity, she was a link in a 3-person group where she was not even the primary focus of the faction. She was just kind of a lackey. So I didn't really have much of an emotional attachment in seeing Liv here to begin with. Again, followed her for years. She's always kind of just seemed like a jag in the company. I mean, her most notable gimmick was the fact that she had a blue tongue at one point. So it goes to show just how much of a legacy she's left over the years. But that said, she wasn't bad here. I thought she did fine. Definitely seen worse. Actually, the worst part of the match was the official they assigned to call the action. God damn, her pinfall count sucked. There was a laughable part here toward the end of the match where both girls are fighting on the top rope, and Becky was kind of leaning over the turnbuckle with her ass stuck straight out at the camera so Liv could do the springboard powerbomb spot. That looked very wacky. Good ass shot, though. But again, it was passable. They both worked hard. They both played their roles well. There were a couple awkward spots, but through and through, it was far from the worst women's match I've seen in the last year. Liv was a nice, sympathetic, fiery babyface. Becky was a great, old school, cowardly heel that kept ducking and dodging anytime she was in a vulnerable position. The finish did come right the fuck out of nowhere. Basically, the finishing sequence saw Liv stomp Becky's arm into the steps. She eventually locked her in the rings of Saturn. Becky then rolled over for a near fall, and then within maybe 15 to 30 seconds after that, Liv tried to charge at Becky, and then Becky just hit the rock bottom clean for the 3. Odd. Also kind of looked like she was out of position there, like she was trying to use the ropes for leverage or something. It was still better than most AEW women's matches I see every week. And I'll tell you, for all the bad stuff there is that we see with WWE every week, one thing they still have over AEW is their women's division. Yes, the oversaturation of the horsewomen in WWE is ridiculous at this point, and I wrote an entire article about that. If you want to go check it out on thechairshot.com, just go Google search the 4 horsewomen need replaced in 2022, and you can read all about it. But as much as I can't stand Charlotte Flair and Sasha Banks at this point, and truth be told, even Becky Lynch is starting to become a bit much at this point, at least WWE can say that they have some female talent that are actually over and can actually work to an extent. And I've never been a Liv Morgan fan, but fuck it, I'll take a Liv Morgan match before I have any desire to see a Jade Cargill match. So, again, didn't really care all that much about this match, but as far as bell-to-bell action goes, I've seen worse. We'll just leave it at that. And that brings us to our impromptu main event. It's a 5-way match for the WWE Championship with champ Big E defending against Kevin Owens, Bobby Lashley, Seth Rollins, and Brock Lesnar. I do appreciate, too, that Seth now officially goes by Seth freaking Rollins. Only took him 7 years to figure that one out, but I mean, for Christ's sake, look how long it took for them to finally just call him Triple H instead of Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And this is actually the first thing I wrote down about this match, which definitely was an omen of epic proportions. Big E, the champ, makes his entrance prior to Brock Lesnar. So we obviously know who's winning the match, don't we? And, well, as it turns out, my prediction came true. And I'm telling you, man, I said it with my top match list of the year when I recapped the Edge Reigns Bryan title match. I will say it again. WWE knows how to do well-constructed, logical, multi-man matches. Whether they're the car wreck spot fest or the coherent story-driven multi-person matches, WWE usually manages to get them right. And this was virtually no different. There were basically 2 ongoing themes throughout the match. The Seth Rollins-Kevin Owens duo, as they worked as the 2 cohesive heels to try to eliminate the babyface competition. That was one story. And the second story was Brock Lesnar smashing people. And both were executed perfectly. My main intrigue with this match, though, was everything they did with Lashley and Lesnar. And given the hand they were playing with those 2 going in, I thought they handled that situation pretty well. They didn't have them interact too much. They had a brief period where Lashley speared Lesnar through the barricade, speared him in the ring, put him in the hurt lock, and that was pretty much it. I probably would have preferred the initial face-off between the 2 before they came to blows, just to get the visual of the dream versus dream scenario on camera, but what's done is done. A Lesnar-Lashley program has been something that I've wanted to see since whenever Lashley came back to the company. Guess that would have been 2017, 2018. And they never did it. It always felt puzzling why they held it off for so long, and with this being the first time actually seeing these 2 physically interact with one another, it was just enough of a taste for me to really want to see that program with these guys that much more. And, an ideal time for that would be Mania. And with Brock winning the strap here, that basically leaves their main event scene with a couple open-ended scenarios. Obviously, they'll eventually want to do Roman and Brock, and whether that's a champion versus champion thing they blow off at the Rumble, maybe you have Lashley win the Rumble match itself and challenge Lesnar for Mania, and then he could do Big E and Roman for Mania or something like that. That's a possibility. You could do the rematch with Big E and Lesnar at the Rumble, have Lashley win the Rumble match, and then set up Lashley and Lesnar that way. There's a whole variety of ways they could go, but even though this was not the initial plan, this is a hell of a main event match and a great ending to the show and a nice way to set up some possible main event title programs heading into Mania season. I know the Lesnar title win kind of backs Reigns into a corner temporarily, and I mean, they could hypothetically do champ versus champ at Mania, but God, really, do we need to see another Reigns-Lesnar match at Mania at this point? Like, especially if it's going to be for the 2 world titles. That's just... Nah, I'll pass on that one. But for sure, I mean, this is probably their most opportune time to capitalize on a Lesnar-Lashley program. And if they're going to do that feud, it's got to happen at Mania. That has the potential to be one of the biggest Mania box office level matches they've done in quite some time. Again, it's a program that people have been wanting to see for a while. It's a fresh feud with 2 guys on a similar playing field in terms of build and martial arts background. And, while it does kind of throw Big E's WWE title reign under the bus, a Roman Big E program for Mania with Big E beating Roman for the Universal title, it's not a bad option. And with Paul Heyman in the air right now, too, that's another layered wrinkle that would be interesting to see play out. I don't necessarily know if Heyman would make a great advocate for a guy like Big E personally, but I mean, it could work. So, yeah, that was day 1 for WWE. Not what I was expecting going in. I mean, for sure, not what they were expecting going in, but I was thoroughly satisfied when the show was over. Most of the matches on the show were all right. The main event was fantastic, both from story and wrestling standpoints. Weakest match was probably the women's match, but it wasn't overtly wretched. I'm glad I checked this one out. I'll definitely do a recap of the Royal Rumble pay-per-view at the end of the month because it is a Big 4 show, and I always make sure to check out the Big 4 events each year. And we'll see where we're headed for Mania season at the end of the month. Again, if the end goal is Lashley Lesnar, I'm content. Anyhow, thanks for tuning into the FSWR podcast. Again, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you smash the sub button, give the show a like, and leave a comment down below to share your thoughts on any or all material discussed on today's program. I will be back this coming Friday for the Dynamite Report and the continuation of our retro review series. Again, we will be looking at NWA World Championship Wrestling from 1986 and World Class Championship Wrestling from 1983. And we will do that each Friday from now until the end of the year. If you enjoy retro content, make sure you stop back and check that show out. And do not worry, we will continue with our usual AEW tirades for the remainder of the year. Gotta give the people what they want. Take care, all. Peace out.